The Unseen Life. What She Built When He Walked Away. Hello, my dear listeners. Welcome to another story that will deeply move your hearts. Today, I'm going to tell you a story about a young woman who emerged from divorce with a baby in her arms and another growing inside her, unbeknownst to her ex-husband. 5 years later, he saw her on the street and wept, realizing the daughters he ignored now called another man Dad. But the most powerful part of this story isn't what he lost. It's what she built, alone, in silence, when no one else believed she was capable of starting over. Tell me, what are you doing this Saturday as you listen? Are you relaxing on the sofa, tackling weekend chores, or just enjoying a quiet morning? Share your thoughts in the comments. Prepare your heart, because what you're about to hear will show you that true strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet, fierce rebuild. The silent departure. It was a Tuesday. 5:38 p.m. The sky over London threatened rain, but none fell. Sarah Miller knew the exact time because she glanced at the kitchen clock. She finished zipping her suitcase. She didn't do it like someone leaving for a trip. She did it like someone closing a coffin. The silence inside the apartment was thick, like accumulated dust. There were remnants of a life there, stacked plates, a turned-over picture frame, the smell of cold coffee no one drank. Nothing screamed, nothing moved. Yet the silence weighed heavily, as if every wall had witnessed too much. The baby slept in the stroller, oblivious to the ending his mother was staging with trembling hands and dry eyes. Sarah didn't cry. Perhaps she had already shed all her tears. Or perhaps, at that moment, crying was a luxury she couldn't afford. She looked at the stroller for a few seconds. Then, at the living room door. And then, she took a deep breath, like someone about to jump from a cliff. James Thorne wasn't there, and that was worse than if he were. He had left hours earlier with a kiss on his son's forehead, not hers. He said something generic like, "Take good care of him." He wore a light blue shirt, and the cologne Sarah had always found invasive. When the door closed behind him, she understood. There was nothing left to save what had once been. They had been together for 7 years, 4 living in that apartment, 1 child. And now, a pregnancy he didn't even know about. Sarah sat for a moment on the edge of the sofa. Her hands rested on her still flat belly. She felt a slight but constant unease. Perhaps it wasn't just the pregnancy. Perhaps it was the way the soul reacts when the heart begs for help and no one listens. On the coffee table lay the envelope with the divorce papers. He signed them without hesitation. There was no fight, no scandal. James simply asked, "Are you sure?" As if she were the one destroying everything. The certainty he demanded had been built over months of contempt, with unanswered calls, late arrivals, the scent of another body clinging to his clothes. Sarah didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just watched. She learned to recognize absence even when he was still walking through the door. The first time she knew she was pregnant, she cried tears of joy. Now, the second positive test rested inside a drawer, next to the gold wedding rings she no longer wore. Neither of them knew about the other. Sarah stood up, took the suitcase, then the baby, and walked towards the door. The sound of the zipper hitting the floor echoed like muffled thunder. A farewell without words, without an audience, without a scene. She didn't wait for him. She didn't leave a note. As she walked down the building's hallway, the neighbors seemed too busy to notice what was crumbling there. The elevator took its time arriving, as if time itself was trying to stop her. But she pressed the button 3 times, with the urgency of someone who knows that if she stops, she'll give up. Outside, the air was heavy. April in London brought the scent of transition, the trees already in bloom, but the winds still cold. Sarah felt a knot in her stomach, the hunger from days without eating properly, and the anguish that replaced her appetite. On the sidewalk, she flagged down a taxi with her free hand. The taxi driver looked at the stroller, the suitcase, and asked no questions. He simply helped put them in the trunk and opened the back door. She got in silently. "Where to, madam?" Sarah hesitated. Only then did she realize she had no clear destination. She only knew she couldn't stay anymore. "To the train station." "Waterloo?" The car began to move, and with it, everything that was once certain began to dissolve. It passed by the avenue where they used to eat ice cream on Sundays, by the bookstore where James used to wait for her on autumn afternoons, by everything that was once routine and now seemed like the set of an old movie she no longer wanted to watch. In the seat beside her, the baby slept peacefully. She watched him tenderly. Dark hair like his father's, delicate features. So small, so innocent in it all, and so dependent on her. There was no room for weakness. She couldn't count on her parents. They never accepted divorce as a possibility. Friends? Most had disappeared when the marriage began to crumble. Only Emily, her best friend, remained. But Sarah didn't want to show up at her house like this, fleeing, exhausted, with one child in her arms and another in her womb. But perhaps it was the only way. The taxi meter kept running, and with it, the time left before James noticed she wouldn't be back. Or maybe he wouldn't notice. Maybe he wouldn't even care. In the front seat, the radio played a slow Spanish song. The lyrics spoke of a love lost between what was said and what one never had the courage to say. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, trying to hold back the nausea. She wasn't afraid of loneliness. She knew it well. What hurt was the absence of meaning. To have loved so much, believed so much, only to end like this, leaving without being stopped. Deep down, a part of her still hoped he would call, that he would say, "Come back. Let's try again." But her phone was silent. The suitcase hit her foot with every turn. Inside, few clothes, worn sandals, documents, a wedding photo she hadn't yet had the courage to tear. At the terminal, she got out with slow movements. The baby woke up, grumbling. She cradled him in her arms, apologized softly, as if he could understand. Maybe he did. Children sense what adults hide. She bought the first ticket she found. She didn't choose the destination. She chose the departure. The terminal bathroom was cold, lit by a light too white. Inside, she washed her face with icy water and looked at herself in the mirror. She was pale. Other children approached the bathroom door. The baby, now awake, looked around with curiosity. Sarah held him tightly, with fear, with love. The bus announcement echoed over the loudspeakers. Platform number, time. She stood up, adjusted her bag strap on her shoulder, and walked. Each step was a break. Each step said, "It's over." As she boarded the bus, she sat near the window, the baby in her arms, her gaze fixed on the glass. Outside, the sky slowly darkened. It began to rain. She didn't know what would come next. She had no idea how she would support 2 children alone. But she knew one thing. She couldn't keep living as if she were invisible. Because, though broken, she still existed. And that was all she had left. What do you think Sarah's first steps in Manchester will be? How will she manage with 2 children on her own? Share your predictions in the comments. A friend's embrace and new beginnings. The suitcase, the baby in her arms, and the bus ticket to Manchester. Her belly still invisible beneath her loose blouse, and a hope so faint it seemed more like a survival instinct than any kind of faith. When she got off at the Manchester terminal, the sky was still damp from the dawn rain. Emily arrived with her hair tied back, a wrinkled blouse, and tired eyes. She opened her arms before Sarah said a single word. "My God, Sarah." Sarah didn't respond. She buried her face in her friend's shoulder and stayed there, motionless. The baby, now awake, fussed between the two of them. Emily gently stroked her back and whispered, "You're home." Emily's apartment was small. One bedroom, a living room, a narrow kitchen, and a balcony overlooking a square with trees and the sound of birds. Sarah and her son slept on a makeshift mattress in the living room. For the first few weeks, she barely left the house. She slept little, ate less. The pregnancy nausea mixed with anxiety for the future, creating a spiral in which time seemed to spin without moving forward. Emily respected the silences. Sometimes she talked to herself while making coffee, telling stories about work, about the neighbors, about neighborhood gossip, all with the subtle intention of reminding her friend that life still went on outside. But Sarah couldn't laugh or cry. She just existed, as if her body had continued the journey, but her soul had remained in London, stopped in front of the door she herself had closed. It was only in the second month that she decided to look for work. "Are you sure, Sarah? Don't you want to wait a little longer? Your belly will grow. It will be harder." "Precisely because of that," she said. "I need to move, Emily. If I don't move now, I'll never get up again." And so it began. The first cleaning jobs came through Emily's neighbors' recommendations. Apartments of elderly people, widowed women, noisy families. Sarah cleaned diligently, sometimes with anger, as if scrubbing away what still hurt inside. Coming home with her back aching, her feet throbbing, and her son in her arms was painful. But, little by little, it began to seem more bearable than sitting idly by, waiting for time to pass. Then came the work with the elderly. Some grumpy ladies, a widower who talked about his dead son as if he were still alive, a woman with Alzheimer's who called Sarah Mary and held her hand with surprising strength. Life found a routine. With the little she earned, Sarah began to save coins in a glass jar. She called it her emotional emergency fund. She knew she would need it one day. She no longer cried hidden in the bathroom with the same frequency. Not because she had overcome it, but because the time of pain had changed its shape. Now it hurt in silence, in a tired, mature way, like a wound that still burns, but no longer bleeds. It was a Thursday afternoon when Emily came home with a folded paper. "It's from David's restaurant. He needs someone to wash dishes. I know, it's not the dream job, but it's steady. Can you combine it with your other jobs? Do you want me to talk to him?" Sarah hesitated. Her body was heavy. The pregnancy was already beginning to show under her loose clothes. But need spoke louder. "All right, but tell him I have a small baby, that I can't do night shifts. If he accepts, I'll try." The following Monday, she was there. The restaurant was small, traditional. Andalusian tiles on the walls, dark wooden tables, the smell of garlic and oil in the air. The name, the Old Bridge Tavern. There was something ancient about the place, an air of permanence. Ethan Cole was the kind of man who didn't fill space with words. Tall, thin, dark-haired, deep eyes. When Sarah arrived, he just looked at her, not with judgment, with attention. "Are you Emily's friend?" "Yes." "She said you work well, and that you're discreet?" Sarah just nodded. "Do you have a small child?" "I do." "One? And I'm pregnant with another." Ethan gave a slight nod. "I need someone Monday to Friday, morning shift. Can you do it?" "I can." "Then you start tomorrow. No application, no interview, no test. You start tomorrow." That night, Sarah told Emily and cried for the first time in weeks. It wasn't sadness. It was relief. At the restaurant, the routine was tough. Dishes, pots, hot water, the smell of frying oil clinging to her skin. Sarah wore thick gloves, an apron, and hardly spoke. But she listened. At first, the employees watched her with curiosity. Who was the new person? Why did she work so silently? But they soon understood that she wasn't there to make friends. She was there to endure. Ethan wasn't an ordinary boss. He arrived early, left late, ate standing up. Sometimes he'd pass by Sarah and say, "Everything good over there?" Other times, he would simply leave a small bottle of water by the sink. He didn't ask questions, and that, for Sarah, was a rare and valuable gesture. A quiet connection one morning, her daughter, her belly already beginning to show, fell ill. High fever. Emily couldn't watch her. Sarah arrived at the restaurant distressed, with the baby in her arms. "I'm sorry. I have no one to leave her with. She has a fever. I just came to tell you I won't be able to work today." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then, he extended his arms. "Give her to me." "What did you say?" "The baby. Give her to me. Sit down there. I'll make you some tea. Breathe. Then tell me what you need." She stood motionless, confused. "You're going to hold her?" "Sarah, I have nephews, and a mother who taught me well." She slowly handed him the child, like someone giving a piece of her heart. Ethan held her naturally. He walked with her through the empty restaurant, humming a soft melody. The child stopped crying. Sarah leaned against the kitchen wall for the first time, relaxing her body. He returned minutes later with a damp towel and a glass of water. "Stay with her today. Rest. We'll see how we manage tomorrow." "You're not going to fire me?" Ethan looked at her seriously. "I don't hire machines. I hire people. And people sometimes need to stop." From that day on, something changed. Sarah began to look at him differently, not with desire, not with haste, just with a silent admiration made of small gestures. He never tried to invade, never asked about the children's father, never spoke more than necessary. But he was there, every day, and being there was already a lot. One Friday afternoon, while drying dishes, Sarah saw him sitting alone, reviewing papers. She gathered her courage, approached him. "Thank you." He looked up. "For what?" "For not asking anything." Ethan smiled slightly. "You already have too many questions inside you. You don't need mine." Sarah felt a knot in her throat. She returned to work in silence, but something inside her, something still very small, began to warm. It wasn't love. It was refuge. And for someone who had spent so long in the storm, any refuge already seemed like the beginning of a home. But Ethan wasn't just a roof. He was the silence that listened, the gesture that expected nothing in return, the presence that demanded no healing. Sarah realized this, little by little. First, in the way he always asked if she had eaten, and never why she was so thin. Then, in how he discreetly cleaned the wet kitchen floor when he saw her busy with her daughter in her arms. He just appeared. That's all. He didn't ask permission. He didn't make speeches. He simply appeared. That winter night, the sink water was steaming, and the dishes seemed endless. Sarah had her youngest daughter strapped to her body with a makeshift cloth. The child was coughing. The pain in her back was unbearable. Ethan entered through the side door of the kitchen and stood silently for a few seconds, observing. She didn't even see him. She was engrossed in work, lost in shapeless thoughts. "You're leaving early today." His voice wasn't authoritative. It was firm. Sarah turned, surprised. "I can't. There are still 2 stacks. I'll wash them." "Ethan, no." "Sarah, go. I asked you as your boss. Now I'm asking you as a man." She stood still, confused by his words, even more by the tone in which he said them, without seduction, without expectations, just with a look that recognized what she was carrying. On the way home, with her daughter in her arms and feeling the icy wind on her face. She thought about what that meant. It wasn't just kindness. It wasn't pity. It was a choice. The following week, he started bringing sweet potato pastries his mother had prepared. He said they were to warm the stomach. He left the container on the counter without looking at her. Sarah tried to return them, but he just raised his hands. My mother's food is not to be refused. Emily noticed it before she did. You're different. How so? Lighter. Not smiling, but lighter. Sarah looked away. He just helps me, and he doesn't demand anything. It's strange. Strange was what you lived before, Sarah. This you're feeling now is what you should have felt from the beginning. In the restaurant, the days continued. But inside her, something began to change. Ethan approached her like someone who knows the timing of things. He was the one who offered to get medicine when one of the girls got sick, who appeared with a simple but fitting toy, like the colorful cube that made the eldest laugh after a full day of bad mood. One night, Sarah forgot her lunchbox. Ethan pushed a plate of rice and lentils towards her. Eat, it's hot. Ethan, you didn't have to. You didn't have to come to work today with the flu either. But you came. She smiled with her lips, her eyes still tired. He sat opposite her. You don't talk much, you know. I say what needs to be said, and what needs to be said now. That you're doing well. She looked at him for a few seconds. I don't feel well. Feeling takes time to reach the truth. Her eyes filled with tears, but she turned her face away. You're strange. You too. What do you think is growing between Sarah and Ethan? Is it just friendship, or something more? Share your thoughts in the comments. A home, not just a refuge. On her eldest daughter's birthday, Ethan appeared with a cake. Chocolate. Simple. With the name written in icing. Sarah stood still at the door. You shouldn't have. She deserves it. Not because of me. Because of her. He handed her the cake, knelt in front of the child, and said, Today is your day, and on your day, everyone has to smile, especially you. The child looked at her mother as if asking permission. Sarah felt it. That night ended with Emily, Ethan, Sarah, and the two girls sitting on the living room floor, eating cake and laughing at the youngest's funny faces as she tasted the icing. No one said family, but everyone felt it. Winter passed slowly. Sarah started saving money in a second glass jar, marked with adhesive tape. Own home. Ethan, unknowingly, helped with this by giving small bonuses he called dignity adjustments. One morning while closing the till, he casually commented, Have you thought about going back to study? Study with two girls, Ethan? I barely have time to wash my hair. You're intelligent. You have things inside you that are dormant. She barely smiled. Careful. Talking to me like that, you might end up convincing me. That's the goal. The youngest daughter began to babble her first words. Mama, Dada, water. One day, Ethan entered the kitchen and heard her shout, E-man. She spoke to me, he. Sarah laughed. Yes, E-man. It must be Ethan. Or maybe Jumantanajina. Maybe just a sow. He knelt down, looked at the child. You can call me whatever you want, as long as you keep laughing like that. Sarah's heart tightened. She felt exposed, but not in danger. Vulnerable, but not weak. That night she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, remembering what he had said weeks earlier. I don't want to save you. I just want to walk with you. Who says that? Who, in a world where everything is urgency and haste, simply wants to walk alongside you? It was a common morning, with the smell of fresh bread and the sound of pots being put away in the kitchen, when he approached her with firm eyes and a low voice. Sarah. Yes. Can I ask you something serious? Of course. Will you let me be your daughter's father? The air escaped her lungs, as if it had been sucked out. There was no rehearsal for that. No warning. She turned slowly. She looked into his eyes. She didn't see burning passion. she saw something greater. Commitment. She felt tears rise, warm, without pain. You already are. And then, love, right there, stayed. It didn't invade. It didn't demand. It just stayed. And Sarah, after carrying so much weight, finally allowed herself to live a light routine. Not perfect, but real. The past reappears. Mornings now began with the girls jumping on the bed, asking for milk and toast with butter. The eldest, at 5, was already starting to ask why other girls had different last names than hers. The youngest wanted to wear her pink dress, even to sleep. Sarah smiled between scolds. Ethan, always present, made the coffee, prepared lunch boxes, answered difficult questions with calm and patience. The house was small, rented, but full of color, with drawings taped to the walls, toys on the floor, and the scent of a vibrant life. That spring afternoon, the sun cut across the Manchester sidewalks with a lazy warmth. Sarah walked slowly, pushing the youngest's stroller, while the eldest held her hand. They were heading to the small park. It was Friday, and Fridays were ice cream day. The child talked about what she had learned in school. She was excited, full of stories. Sarah smiled, listened, responded attentively. Everything seemed normal, safe. Until it wasn't. It was at the corner of Oak Street and Willow Lane. Sarah stopped at the traffic light. A car passed, then another. She adjusted her bag strap on her shoulder, looked ahead, and froze. Across the street, a man was leaving an elegant cafe. He wore a dark blazer, a white shirt, well-polished shoes. He was on the phone, but he stopped talking the instant his eyes met hers. Sarah felt her mouth go dry. James Thorne. His body reacted before his mind. The phone slipped from his hand. He took 2 slow steps onto the sidewalk, his eyes fixed on a scene that made no sense, or more sense than he wanted to admit. A woman, 2 little girls, and a mirror of his own face in the eldest. The world, until then controlled, spun. James felt the ground give way beneath his feet. It wasn't just the visual impact. It was everything that rose with it, everything he never wanted to face. Sarah, resolute, turned the stroller in the opposite direction. "Come on, girls! It's time for ice cream," the eldest protested, but followed her. James crossed the street without looking at the cars. "Sarah!" His voice wasn't arrogant. It was scared. She stopped. Not for him, but for her daughters. She turned slowly. James was 2 meters away. She looked at him directly. His eyes were still the same, brown, intense, a little smaller with age. But they no longer shone the same way. There was confusion. You're here." "I am. And them?" Sarah crossed her arms. "They're my daughters." James looked at the eldest, then at the youngest, who was now sucking her thumb in the stroller. His face changed. He turned pale. "Sarah, not here." He spoke in a low, direct voice. There were mothers around, strollers, children running. James nodded. He didn't try to touch her. He didn't beg. He just said, "Tell me where." "When?" She took a deep breath. "Elmwood Road, number 7. Tomorrow, at 10. And she turned away. She didn't look back. The girls talked amongst themselves, not understanding. The eldest asked why her mother was serious. It was just someone Mom knew a long time ago. That night, Sarah stayed awake for hours. Ethan arrived from the restaurant near midnight. He found her sitting on the sofa, her face towards the window. "What happened?" She took a moment to respond. "I saw James today. He didn't react immediately." "He spoke to you?" "Yes." "Are you going to see him?" "Yes." Ethan nodded. "Do you want me to stay with the girls?" "Do you want to?" He sat beside her. "I won't ask more questions." Only after a few minutes did he say, "If he hurts you again, I'll know." She turned her face, a small smile. You protect me too much. I'm just close by. How do you think James will react to seeing his daughters for the first time? What challenges do you foresee for Sarah and Ethan now that James is back in the picture? Let us know in the comments. The weight of absence. 10 the next morning, James was standing in front of the building. He wore a light blue shirt, the same color he wore the last time she saw him, 5 years ago. Coincidence or provocation? She couldn't tell. Sarah came down with a firm step, hair tied back, no makeup, her face tired, but dignified. Let's walk. They walked a block in silence. James looked around, clearly out of place in that working-class neighborhood of Manchester. It was he who broke the silence. They're mine, aren't they? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? She stopped, looked him straight in the eyes. Why did you never ask? Not once. Why did you watch me leave with a baby in my arms and not bother to find out if he had siblings? You did everything you could to erase our history, James. And you succeeded. He lowered his head. I made a mistake. I got lost. No, you chose yourself. And I chose myself too. Only too late. She took a deep breath. I want to know them. It's not about what you want. It's about what you lost the right to demand. James looked at her. Do you hate me? No. But I no longer recognize you. There was a silence between them. Are you with someone? She hesitated. James closed his eyes for a second. He's good to them. Sarah felt a tear escape. He has been. From the beginning. That's what matters. James nodded. There was nothing more to say. I just want to see them. Know about them. Be present, if possible. She crossed her arms. If you really are going to be present, you'll have to endure the time, the questions, the doubts, and above all, the fact that they might not want you back. He didn't respond. She continued. But if you want to try, find me in a week. If you still want to, we'll talk again. Sarah turned away. James stayed there. What? Because at that moment he finally saw what he had left behind, and he understood there, in silence, standing in the middle of the sidewalk, that some absences are not filled with regret. The next day, James returned. Same time, same place. Sarah was sitting on the balcony with her youngest daughter in her arms, and the eldest drawing with colored chalk on the floor. The sun slowly set over the rooftops, and the air smelled of warm bread from a nearby bakery. He climbed the steps with a tense body, his hands in his pockets, the same wrinkled blazer from the day before. He carried a bouquet of simple flowers, the kind bought last minute. When he got close, he hesitated. Sarah looked up, saw the gesture, but didn't react. They're for you. She looked at the flowers for a few seconds and then said, There's a vase in the kitchen. You can put them there if you want. He went inside, and for a moment, that simple home enveloped him with the strength of something he had never known. There was no luxury, no elegance, but there was warmth. The sound of the girls, the smell of freshly washed clothes, drawings taped to the living room walls. When he returned, Sarah was already standing. The eldest daughter looked at him with curiosity. He tried to smile. The girl hid behind her mother. She's shy. She's like me. Sarah slowly raised her face. It's better. James felt it. No strength to argue. Can I talk to you? Sarah pointed to a plastic chair on the balcony. They sat facing each other. You didn't wait a week. I couldn't. Why? He took a moment to respond, his eyes fixed on his feet, as if searching for words on the ground. Because I slept and dreamed of her, the eldest. She called me Dad, and then she turned away, and I stayed there, standing, calling her. Sarah said nothing. James ran his hands over his face. I was a coward. There's no other word. When you left home, I felt relief, as if I had gotten rid of something. But with time, seeing that you didn't call, that you didn't ask for help, that you didn't beg, I started to feel as if a part of me had died with you. It didn't die. It stayed alive, growing, crying, walking, talking, while you turned your face away. Sarah's voice was firm, but without anger. It was the tone of someone who had already screamed everything she could, and now only the truth remained. You knew you had a son. You left with him in your arms. Even so, you never asked. You never wanted to know if he had a fever, if he slept well, if he went to kindergarten. And then another one was born. And even that didn't make you look for me. Because, James, what would a call have cost you? He lowered his gaze. He had no courage. Courage is for those who stay. You fled. Silence. The girls played inside the house. Sarah heard their laughter, the sound of pencils falling to the floor. You were always afraid of what you felt, afraid of commitment, of love, of needing someone. But when I left, I no longer expected anything, neither love nor help. I just wanted peace. James looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Are you different? No, James, I'm just whole. He helped you put the pieces back together? Sarah took a deep breath. No. He helped me understand that I was never just pieces. I was just too tired to remember it. James clutched the edge of the chair. I'm not here to take anything from anyone. Just let me know them. Be close. I know I don't have the right to call them mine, but at least I want to be there for them. Sarah looked at him for several seconds. You want to be there now? After 5 years? Why? Because I saw what I lost, and I'm willing to hear everything you have to say, even if it hurts, even if I don't like it. She stood up, went to the kitchen, brought 2 glasses of water, returned, and sat down. Do you remember the last time you saw me? Yes. You walked out the door without looking back. The baby was sleeping. I was with the suitcases, and inside me, there was already another being growing. He closed his eyes, swallowed hard. I felt it, that night, that I had done something that couldn't be fixed. Sarah took a sip of water. It can't be fixed, but you can live with the consequences. I'm willing to. I don't know if they'll want me to. But you'll let me try? Sarah leaned back in the chair. She looked inside, at the girls sitting on the rug, concentrating on a puzzle. Then she looked back at him. If you come in now, you'll have to stay. They don't need another absence. James held the glass tightly. I'm not leaving. I don't want promises. I want facts. You're going to start from the beginning. Introduce yourself. Listen. Respect their time. And mine. You have a lot to make up for, and almost nothing to demand. I understand. She stood up. Come back tomorrow, in the afternoon. Bring books, or simple toys, but don't overdo it. They don't need gifts. They need presents. James nodded. Can I ask one last thing? Depends. Have you forgiven me? She thought for a few seconds. No, but today it doesn't hurt anymore. And then she went inside without looking back. James stood there, on the balcony. Alone? For the first time, in silence. Because sometimes, the hardest part isn't asking for forgiveness. It's learning to stay silent and listen to the weight of what you failed to live. What do you make of Sarah's honesty and James's desire to reconnect? Do you think he can truly earn their love and forgiveness? Share your thoughts. The road to acceptance, James returned as promised. He arrived punctually in the afternoons, always with a book or a puzzle in his hands. He didn't bring sweets or expensive toys. And as Sarah had asked, he didn't try to buy the affection he hadn't built. He was restrained, a bit too formal for girls who didn't know what to do with this man, who looked at them with a mixture of guilt and tenderness. The eldest observed him with distrust. She sat nearby, but without touching him. She responded with short sentences, and sometimes avoided his gaze. The youngest was less resistant. From time to time, she would hand him a toy, like someone offering a crumb of curiosity. James accepted that, as if it were gold. Sarah watched from a distance. She didn't intervene, didn't encourage or prevent. She just watched in silence, the small movements of a reunion that was born crooked, and that perhaps would never fully straighten out. Ethan, on the other hand, remained as always. Constant. He arrived from the restaurant, washed his hands, kissed the girls on the forehead, and asked how their day had been. He sat on the floor with them, helped with homework, taught them old Spanish songs his grandmother used to sing to him. He was the hug, the time, the smell of home. James noticed it, and the more he noticed it, the more unsettled he became. One afternoon, he arrived before the agreed time. Sarah wasn't home yet. Emily was watching the girls that day. James found them at the neighborhood park. Both ran freely among the trees, and Ethan was there, sitting on a wooden bench, eyes attentive, a calm smile. The eldest stumbled. Ethan was the first to get up. He ran to her, knelt down, wiped her knee with his hand, and said something in a low voice that made the girl laugh. Then he picked her up. The youngest, seeing this, also ran to him, and there, before James's eyes, both launched themselves at Ethan, with the intimacy of someone who knows no distance. "Daddy!" they shouted in unison, like someone absolutely certain of the name they had chosen to give to the love they received every day. James stood still, a few feet away, motionless. He felt his breath catch. The sound of their laughter mixed with the knot in his throat. It wasn't anger. It was loss, pure and definitive. There, in that instant, he saw the cost of absence. It wasn't the missed important dates, the forgotten birthdays, nor the alimony paid on time. It was what hadn't been built, what hadn't been lived. Ethan wasn't a father by blood, but he was there. He had always been there. And more importantly, he was loved. The girls looked for him with their eyes, with their bodies, with their hearts. James turned away before anyone noticed him. He left with his hands in his pockets and his shoulders heavy. In the following days, he tried to pretend it didn't hurt. He continued visiting, even more punctually. He brought stories, games, asked what they learned at school. But something inside him had changed. Now he knew he was on ground that was no longer just his, if it ever was. One afternoon, while Sarah was hanging clothes on the line, James appeared with an illustrated children's book. The eldest was sick, a mild fever, but enough to make her sensitive. He offered to read to her. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. James went in, sat on the edge of the bed. The girl listened to him with moderate attention, her eyes half closed. At the end of the story, she didn't smile. She just said, "Thank you," and turned over. James got up. Sarah watched him from the doorway. "Is she like that with everyone or just with me?" Sarah sighed. She learned early that the world can disappear suddenly. It took her a lot to trust again. And she trusts Ethan. He never disappeared. He nodded, like someone receiving a sentence. The next day, Ethan arrived from work and found James sitting at the kitchen table, with Sarah serving coffee. The girls were in the living room, drawing. Ethan greeted him with a nod. James responded. There was silence between them. Not awkward, but layered. "Do you want to stay for dinner?" Ethan asked. James looked at him, surprised. "I don't want to intrude. If the idea is to be present, then sit down." James sat down. He said nothing more. They had dinner, rice, lentils, and baked fish. The girls talked about school, laughed, interrupted each other. Ethan cut the fish into small pieces. James tried to keep up. Sarah watched in silence, her gaze divided between pride and a certain weariness. At bedtime, Ethan took the girls to their room. He read a story. He did the characters' voices. The youngest laughed heartily. The eldest asked for a kiss. James heard it all from the kitchen. The laughter, the whispers, the lights turning off, the sound of the door closing carefully. Ethan returned. He sat at the table, looked at James. You're going to need time and patience. Love, they already have. James didn't respond immediately. You don't hate me? He finally asked. If I hated you, I wouldn't let you in. Why? Because they deserve to know who you are, even if they never call you Dad. James lowered his gaze. And you don't feel threatened? No, because I'm here. Every day. That cannot be replaced by any visit. James nodded. For the first time, without anger, without envy. Only with pain and acceptance. I was an idiot. It took me 5 years to understand what you built. I didn't build it alone. She was the one who let me stay. Sarah appeared at this kitchen doorway. She stood there, listening. James turned. Thank you for not closing this door. Sarah crossed her arms. I just left it open. Coming in or going out is your decision. James took a deep breath. I want to come in, even if it hurts. She nodded. Then come in slowly. And don't promise what you can't deliver. And he came in. Not as a father, but as someone who finally understood that love is not demanded, it is earned, day by day. What do you think of James's realization and decision? Do you believe he can truly earn a place in his daughters' lives now? Tell us what you think. Peace and a full heart, and James tried. He tried with a gentleness he had never possessed, with the humility that only loss can teach. He appeared on Saturdays with the books his eldest daughter now loved, stories of mystery and invented craziness. He played dominoes with the youngest, even though she didn't quite understand the rules yet. He brought a practiced calm, which sometimes broke mid-sentence when nostalgia unexpectedly overwhelmed him. Sarah saw it all, not with romanticism or resentment, with the clarity of someone who knows exactly where she is, and with whom she is. She respected the steps James took, but she wasn't fooled by them. She had long ago stopped expecting anything from him, and it was that inner freedom that allowed her to look without hatred, speak without bitterness, live without fear. At the restaurant, Ethan remained the man who never promised, but always delivered. The girls ran into his lap at the end of the day. The eldest recounted her achievements at school, and the youngest asked if they could marry him when they grew up. He laughed and answered seriously, "Only if Mommy lets you." Sarah smiled. The love she felt for Ethan wasn't made of urgency. It was made of presence, of coffees brewed in silence, of notes on the fridge, of blankets placed over her on cold dawns. It was a love without spectacle, but complete. She knew that, for a long time, she had confused intensity with care, that she had expected a type of love from James that he simply didn't have to give, and that only when she was left alone, without applause, without an audience, without help, did she find her own ground. Not the ground of survival, but the ground of dignity. One night, they were all in the same space. Ethan was cooking something light for dinner. Sarah was helping the eldest with her homework. James was on the rug with the youngest, who was sticking stickers on his face while laughing. It was an improbable, but real scene. Sarah got up to get something from the kitchen. As she passed James, he looked up. "You're happy?" She paused for a moment. She didn't answer immediately. She looked at her daughter laughing in his arms, then at Ethan, humming an old Spanish song. Finally, she looked at James. "I'm at peace, and for me, that was always harder than being happy." He nodded. He looked back at the child. "I look at them, and it's as if I missed an entire movie, as if I closed my eyes at the beginning and woke up now, during the credits." "But you woke up," she said. "Not in time to be what you wanted, but maybe in time to be what they need, within the space that's left." James smiled, a sad but honest smile. "And you? Do you regret leaving?" "No, I regret not leaving sooner." Ethan heard the sentence. He said nothing. He kept stirring the pot, but his eyes were fixed on the half-open door. Sarah knew he heard, and she didn't hide it, because between them, there was nothing left to hide. After everyone left and the girls were asleep, Sarah sat on the balcony. Ethan brought a blanket and a chamomile tea. "You spoke beautifully. I only spoke the truth." He sat beside her. "Sometimes I still fear losing this. Not because of him, but because life has a way of taking away what we slowly begin to love." She rested her head on his shoulder. "You won't lose it. Why did you stay?" And there, in that silent moment, she understood the magnitude of what she had built, not alone, but consciously. She didn't choose Ethan as a comfort. She chose him because, after being absent from herself for so long, he reminded her that love is care, and that you don't have to shout to be heard when the other person already walks hand in hand with your silence. In the days that followed, James remained present. He helped with small things, attended school functions, participated in birthdays, but always from the outside, with the respect of someone who understood that the center was no longer his place. The girls gradually built a new kind of affection with him. Shy, without obligation, with curiosity. There were hugs, but still with some distance, and he accepted it, without haste, without wanting to replace. One Sunday, as they walked in the park, the eldest took his hand for a few seconds. He didn't react. He just let her decide the time, and when she let go, he stayed by her side at the same pace. Sarah watched from a distance, and she felt that finally, everything was complete. Even if pieces were missing, even if there were pains that would not return, there were no winners there. There were presences, and absences that learned to wear the cloak of responsibility. That night, before going to sleep, Sarah looked at her two sleeping daughters. She kissed each of their foreheads, with the same reverence of someone who knows how much it cost to keep them safe from chaos. Then she lay down next to Ethan. His eyes were already closed, but he held her hand. She whispered, "You didn't save us. You stayed, and that was more than enough." And he squeezed her hand, without saying anything. Because love, sometimes, is that. Knowing there's nothing left to prove, just to remain. If this story touched you, if at some point you saw yourself in her pain, in his regret, or in the silence of someone who loves silently, then this story is also yours. And now, I want to hear from you. In the comments, do you believe someone who abandoned their family can ever truly regain the right to love what they left behind? Or are there some pains that simply cannot be repaired? Write it down below. I read everything, and if this story moved you, don't forget, leave your like, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to the channel, because every week there's a new, realistic, intense story made to bring out what you don't dare to say out loud.